What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, joined as always by one of the top fantasy rankers in the game, Sean Kerner. And today we have a very special guest to talk running backs. I'm talking about a senior writing for The Athletic, all-in kid, Jake Seeley. Jake, what's going on, man? Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, how about the all-in fiance kid, Jake Seeley? I'm celebrating the crap out of it. I'm going to hijack the beginning of your show, but thank you so much.
Oh, man, congratulations once again. Newly engaged, all-in kids.
I know.
I love to hear it. And yeah, man, good vibes. We're gonna start the pod with that. And
exactly.
Jake, I want to ask you, we're going to kind of talk through all these running backs in the running back 2 tier and beyond, but I just want to ask, what's your overall running back approach this year? Are you kind of find yourself going, with any of the, zero RB, hero RB kind of strategies? Is it kind of different by draft slot? What are you doing?
Yeah, pretty much it's the same as what I've been doing for, I'd say, the majority of my career is whatever you want to call it, like bell cow running back. Chris over at Greta Street Tavern that writes for us, Chris Vaccaro, he kind of said that a couple of years ago. It's kind of turned into hero RB, whatever people want the fun names for it. But it's essentially been, I want, if I can, 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. And bell cow doesn't mean that they have to touch the ball 20 times a game. It means for fantasy purposes, they're bell cow. Somebody I can trust week in and week out with a floor around double digits and the ceiling to go 20 plus. So that's my goal. That doesn't mean it's always going to happen. I mean, I just did the super flex draft and my first pick was Cooper Kupp. And so, I still got Joe Mixon because of how super flexes fall, but my strategy out of the 4 spot was because we know how things can shake up that kind of draft. I'm not going to beholden to myself to say, screw the value on the board. I'm just going to draft running backs because I got to get my running backs. But I'd like to get 2 or 3 out of the first 3 rounds. And as a teaser for one of your questions later on, there's a reason because it ties into something else that happens later in drafts very often. But I do like to get 1, if not 2, ideally. But yeah, if I'm sitting there, I'll give you an example. If I'm sitting there at 9, and only Cooper Kupp's off the board and Jamar Chase is sitting there, I'm taking him. And if Justin Jefferson's still there on the way back or Stephon Diggs, I'm taking them. So I won't go crazy with it, but I would like to do it.
Yeah, and that kind of lines up with what Sean and I have been talking about. I think there's a big teardrop in the, from the wide receiver 1s down to, maybe after the top 10. So yeah, you see a Cooper Kupp, a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, guys like that, Devontae, Tyreek. I think it is worth taking one of those guys, and you could still get, your running backs, in those other 2 rounds. But I think you really do need those wide receivers earlier, a little more than usual this year. But let's get right into it with Jonathan Taylor. I was about to. I'm going off the wrong.
He's still on the board. Holy shit.
Right. No, wow. Leonard Fournette. I just had 2 best ball drafts back to back. And I got Jonathan Taylor in both of them. And in one of them, I got Jonathan Taylor with the 1.2. So my mind is just
I did that too.
Overtaken.
JT is on the mind. Yeah.
Yes. But excuse me with that. Leonard Fournette, we started talking about him yesterday, but I want to jump back in. Jake, I'll ask you this. Are you worried about the chatter about the weight? Are you worried about the chatter about Rashad White?
So no and no. So if you're drafting Leonard Fournette last year, he's top 10 running back, not even with 200 carries. And he was on pace for 2 teens. And I think that's what he is. The fact is Leonard Fournette's touchdown reliant. He's playing with Tom Brady. We're not looking for him to go out there to go back to the bell cow situation. We're not looking for him to go out there and carry the ball 20 times a game. That's not what Leonard Fournette is, especially at this point of his career, especially with how much he's been hurt throughout his career. I think the passing game is a little bit, so I said flat no, probably isn't the best for Rashad White. I think it's more of not enough that I'm going to knock him out of being a top end RB2. Do I put him in RB1 territory where he finished? No, I don't think anybody's doing that. But anybody's doing that because we know his value is lying more in the touchdowns and that we all do expect him to see a little tick back in the passing game with Rashad White. Rashad White's value is just great because if anything were to happen to Leonard Fournette, hey, you're the lead running back stepping in alongside Tom Brady. So I'm not that concerned. I would be concerned if people were drafting Leonard Fournette as the top 10 running back, but again, nobody's doing that. That's why he's at 13.
Yeah, and, you know, I look at this roster for Tampa Bay and I'm like, Rachaad White is there. Sure. He can catch the ball, but I still think he'll struggle a little bit in pass protection. Keyshawn Vaughn, Gio Bernard. I mean, it's really not that inspiring. I think Fournette actually could be a workhorse. It's just that they threw the ball 719 times last year. So like they didn't exactly need it, but I don't think Leonard Fournette is like, a guy who, if they need him to handle, 20, 25 carries over, a longer stretch, that he couldn't do that. So I like me some Leonard Fournette. Anything to add on that, Sean, with Lenny?
No, I like where he's going at RB13. I think the weight gain maybe bumped down his ADP a bit, which was nice. I would say the only I would call a slight concern with Fournette is the offensive line. Ali Marpet retired. Ryan Jensen looks like he's out potentially for the full season. They look like the backup center got carted off today. It was just cramps, so he should be fine. But they're 1 or 2 injuries away of this offensive line potentially falling apart. And again, I'm still drafting Fournette here, but that's my only concern with him, is the offensive line will take a step back this year potentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair concern. I do think, just with the Bucs, having Tom Brady and all that firepower, it's going to be tough for defenses to really, stack the box or do anything like that. So I think they'll find a way to kind of keep it open enough for Fournette to get his. Let's go to Saquon Barkley. Jake, last year, I know Sean and I were pretty adamant about fading Saquon. Now he's, it's a little bit more reasonable investment. I think he's at RB14. The O-line should be better. You got some better situation regarding the coaching staff. So what do you think his ceiling is in this new offense? And is his floor still as low as it was the last couple of years, where he would have games beyond just the injury? He would have games where he would run like 15 times for 5 yards.
It wasn't quite that bad, but yeah,
I
understand.
He had a 13 for 1. I am not making that up.
No. There are some pretty, I think this year, I find a couple things interesting here is that everybody's like, oh, Brian Daboll could potentially help Daniel Jones and fix this offense. And they're just like, oh, Saquon Barkley, he's been hurt too much. And this offense is going to stink. And they praise what Daboll can do for the entire offense. If it's the entire offense, it's going to help Saquon Barkley. The interesting thing here is, too, we all know, everybody knows the offensive line is better. We see Evan Neal, and we're like, oh, freak talent. The thing about Evan Neal is that part of the reason you draft and get sent straight to the right tackle spot and not the left, like there wasn't even an open competition. They're like, you're headed to the right tackle. It's because he's better in pass block or run blocking. He's working on his pass blocking. There was actually some matchups with Thibodeau already in practice where you say, ooh, but that being said, better run blocking offensive line is only going to help him. Being 100% is only going to help him. I've had him inside my top 10 this entire offseason because I looked at last year too. And you guys remember this. We were drafting this time last year saying if you're drafting Saquon, you're drafting him for the end of September, October. He's not going to be 100% until then. Every doctor out there said that. And then we get to weeks 3 and 4, almost 100 yards, over 100 yards combined, touchdowns in both. And everybody's like, oh my God, Saquon's back, it's happening. And then the freak injury where he rolls up his ankle comes back and he's never like he was before that. So it's a freak injury. It's not the quad. It's not the hamstring. It's not over and over and over and over again. If he's 100%, if the offensive line is supposed to be better and Daboll can do anything for this offense, I think the ceiling is what we just saw last year. Austin Eckler, he's not going to run for 100 yards, but he's going to total 100 yards a lot of the weeks, even on a poorer offense. I think ceiling is what Austin Eckler just finished last year, number 2. I think that's a ceiling. Do I put him there? Do I think he's going to get there? No, I have him at 8. That's where I've had him the entire offseason. But I think that at this point, this is why I have so much Saquon this year.
Yeah, I think this is the time to kind of hop back on the Saquon train. And you make a really good point. Everyone's talking about, we're trying to figure out Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson and is Kenny Galladay still got it? And should we be drafting Daniel Jones late? And it's like, how about just take the guy who's going to get like 20 touches a game because they have to. Yeah, they have to. So, Sean, what do you think about the range of outcomes for Saquon this year?
Yeah, I think he still has top 5 upside if he could stay healthy. And I think we wisely faded him last year because he was already entering the season with an injury. So, he looks good right now. All reports sound like he's 100%. So I think we're getting a steal with him at RB14. And he's actually, he has no competition for touches there whatsoever. So he's going to be a workhorse back. And as Jake mentioned, the offensive line should be better. So he's very appealing as ADP, and he's right at the end of, I would say, the RB1 tier, because then it drops off a cliff after him. Things start to get dicey, or should I say icy, as the frozen pond is coming up. So I think that, I love getting guys at the end of a tier, and that's Barkley right now. So I love getting him at RB14.
Yeah, feels good to finally be able to take some Saquon. BX got a rep for rep for the hood. But let's talk about Zeke, because there was a time when the good old days when Zeke was right there with Saquon, neck and neck in fantasy. And Jake, I want to ask you, do you think some of the struggles, especially last year, were due to injury, and do you think Tony Pollard's role will continue to grow at Zeke's expense?
Yeah, so I think part of it was, I think Zeke is very much in the same conversation at this point of his career as Leonard Fournette, James Conner, the guys who are going to be touchdown reliant, because, he looked better earlier in the season. He had the one game with 2 weeks in a row, 20 carries, but well over 4 or 5 yards per carry in both. So he looked more explosive in them, but was it injury, or is it wearing down, or is it a mix of both? I think it's a lot of questions out there. I think what we know at this point with the workload and age, anybody would be expected to be worn down at this point, no matter how much you or a freak you are. And we've seen the practices, and he looks explosive again. But when you have somebody like Tony Pollard and you have the NFL, it's copycat league. We say that every single year. We copy ourselves saying it every single year. Is that when you have somebody like Tony Pollard, the best running back in the history of football, as everybody knows, and wanted to see him take over for Zeke last year, is that it's just stupid not to give more to Tony Pollard. Because here's the truth about the Cowboys, and this is the other part that we have to think about. With the Giants, they're not contending. They're not keeping Saquon likely. Just run him into the ground. Not that that's fair to the player, but if the Cowboys have playoff, which they should, aspirations, if they have Super Bowl aspirations, do you win a Super Bowl without Zeke? It's questionable. Do you win it with both of them, he and Pollard? That's a good chance that you will. So why not copy the blueprint around the NFL? You don't have to go full 50-50 split like Denver, but 60-40 more this year, 65, even 35. And then, Zeke should be right in this range. He should be in the conversation with Fournette and the like. And he definitely still has the upside for top 10 based on touchdowns.
Sean, Jake kind of made the case for Zeke a little bit. You feel like there's a big teardrop, from Saquon. So give me your take on Zeke.
Yeah, just Saquon is going to be a workhorse. Like I said, he has no competition for touches. And Zeke, unfortunately, Tony Pollard is probably better at this point in his career, but they're paying Zeke way too much money. We're not going to see Pollard leapfrog Zeke and be starting over a healthy Zeke. And I'm willing to forgive Zeke last year. He was playing through a partially torn PCL. That's got to be painful. It absolutely limited him. So as somebody that has a ton of Tony Pollard this year, please, Zeke, rest when you have a torn PCL this time around. But yeah, I think that, in this range, he is a fairly safe play. Like, I still think he has a high floor, but his ceiling is definitely capped with Pollard there. So I rather get Pollard, a few rounds later, just because the upside is massive there. And this is a range where I think there's still, pretty good wide receivers on the board. I don't like to get caught shorthanded at wide receiver. So this is usually the point in the draft. I'm trying to get my second or third wide receiver sometimes. So Zeke, he just sits in, on top of a pretty big tier. And I don't like drafting guys like that. But it is, this is a discount compared to where we normally get Zeke. I'm just not buying into him this year.
Yeah, I actually don't mind Zeke. I kind of lump him in a little, like, he's not quite Saquon. I agree that right. Saquon is, I think there's more upside at this point. But it was odd because, Zeke last year, he ran a route on 60% of the dropbacks, but he only got targeted 15% of the time, whereas Pollard got targeted 26% of the time. And so Zeke ends up with a career low in receiving yards per game. But the Cowboys now, they're having all these wide receiver injuries. If Zeke's out there and he's healthier, I think his efficiency could rebound. He's still, I think he's still got a year or two left. And the touchdown upside still massive. So, it's not as exciting as maybe it was in his heyday to draft him, but I also don't think it'll be quite as frustrating as it was these past couple of years either. Like I think he's fine. I think that's a
Yeah.
good way to describe it. He's fine.
I would prefer him like when he falls outside the top 20, which has happened in some of my drafts. That's when I absolutely target him. But RB15 just seems steep to me.
RB16 is David Montgomery. And, you know, he's a guy that he tends to be polarizing, but then you look up at the end of the season and he always seems risky, and then he's just kind of there, and he has great numbers, even on some shaky teams. So, Jake, what are you doing with Montgomery this year? How risky is he? You know, probably a bottom 5 offensive line in Chicago. You know, different regime, but you know, Khalil Herbert maybe mixing in a little more, but. I mean, the Bears don't have any pass catchers, and Montgomery has shown some ability there. So, you know, perhaps he could offset some of those other issues with the passing game work.
Yeah, I'm kind of out on Montgomery at this spot. I think that we've seen some drafts similar to what Sean was just saying. It's like other drafts where he'll fall further just because depending on who you're drafting with and the perception of being there is. So there's twofold here. One is, well, actually it's three. One is you're talking about an offense similar to the Ravens where you're led by a rushing quarterback. So you're going to have that factor of that percentage just comes out of the backfield. So you got to take that away. So what usually happens in those kind of backfields, your lead running back, 200, 220 carries, and you can finish as an RB1, but it's going to be touchdown reliant. I mean, hell, Mark Ingram did it a bunch of years ago, only on 200 carries. Actually, it was like 199 or somewhere around there. But the reason we like Dobbins is because we're hoping for the touchdown of the offense. You mentioned bottom 5 offensive line, what we all expect to be a bottom 5 offense. And then the second part that comes into play here for me is I like Khalil Herbert. I'm a Khalil Herbert guy. I think at times last year you even saw that not one, only he can carry the workload if he's asked to, is two, I think he's potentially a better running back. I mean, we saw Montgomery for 2 to 3 years can't even get over 4 yards per carry, which isn't a telltale complete story. We all know that, but it does paint a little bit of a picture. And when you watch Montgomery play, he's a nice all-around running back. I just don't think he's much better than replacement level. And I'm not saying that Herbert's definitively better, but if you're going to see both of them out there, and we've already heard reports that they're both on the field at the same time, one of them is lining up on the line of scrimmage or running a route, like whatever it might be, even if you get a 60-40 split of a backfield that you're losing 20-25% already to Justin Fields, I just don't think the touchdown reliance is going to be there. The passing game you're right about, but I think Herbert could do that too. And you saw Fields, even with Montgomery, it's very inconsistent. 7 targets one week, 2 targets the next. So it's kind of like all over the map. So I'd rather have Montgomery as an RB3.
Sean, how you feeling about Montgomery this year?
Not great. And I love, this is our 4th annual David Montgomery check-in. This always turns into the David Montgomery pod, but he definitely gives me some Frozen Pond vibes because as Jake mentioned, you know, the new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsky, he's coming over from Green Bay. So I do expect more of an even timeshare this year between Monty and Khalil Herbert. And apparently Monty's seeing some special team reps, which is very bizarre and not good news for his, you know, bell cow prospects. So this is again, same thing with Zeke. I don't mind either back if they fall outside of the top 20, but anytime you're drafting whoever it is at RB15 or RB16, you're probably reaching for them because there's 6 or 7 guys that I value equally. So again, this is the range where I like to just wait at running back, and I don't mind Monty if he falls outside of the top 20 because he does have workhorse upside, but it is limited. I mean, the offensive line is brutal. So this is a situation where I'm rarely taking Montgomery if, you know, he's still on the board inside the top 20.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, there are definitely some floor concerns with, you know, the offensive line, the potential lack of touchdown equity in what could be a really bad offense. And just the new regime in general. I mean, I think that's also could be a knock on Herbert as well. I mean, they might just start playing, what's his name, Tristan Ebner, for all we know, you know. So, you know, there are just some concerns. And I look at, you know, some of the receivers going around there. I mean, you can still get a Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin's on the board a lot of the time. So Kyle Pitts is actually sometimes still there as well. So Pittman, there's just, I think it's just not the strength of the draft here, you know, just to be taking running backs here because, you know, Sean, as you and I talked about on the last pod, a lot of the running backs in that next probably 2 tiers that we're going to get to, I don't think there's as much difference. You know, there's a wide range of outcomes with all of them. They all have low floors. So Yeah, Montgomery's not a guy I'm getting too much of. I do think he'll still catch a lot of passes, though. I will say that even with the mobile quarterback, I just think Chicago needs somebody to catch the football. Okay, Cam Akers. He had quite an interesting, 18 months or whatever you want to call it. I mean, just burst on the scene at the end of 2020, and then gets hurt, with the Achilles injury, comes back way too soon and has just a abysmally inefficient postseason. But Jake, I'll ask you, was that just an aberration due to coming back too soon? We've also heard whispers about, not whispers, I mean, the coach himself, Sean McVay, said, hey, Daryl Henderson is going to be more involved this year. So what do you make of Cam Akers going here at RB17?
So since after the Super Bowl, one of my way too early rankings, this is now, so that's what, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So it's like 6 months of this. So anybody out there that's seen me on my shows, like, you already know where I'm going with this. So I apologize. Maybe skip ahead and listen to Sean instead. But I'm going to say what I always say is, like, watch and listen to what teams tell us. Not Sean McVay. Coaches lie all the time. Sean McVay is lying out of the side of his mouth. Sean McVay, one, likes to rely on one guy when he can. Two, and that's been proven. Two, what I'm going with here, and again, this could be wrong because doctors know more than we do, but what we know and saw is the team told us coming off a 6 months, which nobody ever does, Achilles injury, with the playoffs when he faced really good teams, actually including the 49ers on the defensive side, with the Super Bowl on the line, Sean McVay and the Rams said, we're going to make you a bell cow. We have Henderson. We had Sony Michel playing. Like, we have options, and we're still going to give you the bell cow workload with the playoffs and Super Bowl on the line. That tells me what the team thinks and what the team wants to do. So I'm going with Cam Akers now, a hell of a lot far removed, a full-on year removed from this injury, was getting bell cow treatment 6 months when you're not supposed to come back from this injury. Tells me Cam Akers is going to be a bell cow and one of the most positive game script, offensive powerhouses in the NFL. I have Cam Akers as a rock solid RB1. I could be going down with his ship, or I could be going down with his Achilles because maybe he's never 100% again. But I'm going with what the team told us and not what McVay is lying to us right now in preseason.
Sean, thoughts?
Cam Akers at 17 is a fair price. I'm not worried about Henderson much at all. As Jake mentioned, McVay does like just relying on one back. And Sony Michel was able to leapfrog Henderson last year, partly because Henderson was in and out of the lineup, and McVay was like, I just want to know who's the running back. So he just started using Sony Michel, and then he let a less than 100% totally ineffective Akers be the workhorse over Henderson. So with Akers being more of a normal amount removed from the Achilles, like last season was a miracle that he came back. So I'm willing to forgive him last year. I think Akers is going to dominate touches in this offense. And, they threw the ball at the league high rate of 64% inside the 5 last year. I'm expecting some regression there. So Akers is, a decent bet for double-digit touchdowns. Like, he's going to get plenty of goal line chances. So I like Akers, just in terms of volume and touchdown upside to target him in this range.
Yeah, I'm not buying Akers as much as you guys. I think they're just like a lot of these other backs. They're just enough concerns to where I'd still rather probably target a wide receiver or a tight end in this range. I mean, I don't think it's fair to say Sean McVay always wants to go to number one guy. I think Daryl Henderson, who we'll talk about later, but I think he's a guy that it's just, you're not going to be able to give him, 20 carries for 17 games. But like, I think McVay also, when Todd Gurley started breaking down, he kept with CJ Anderson, even, throughout the Super Bowl. And he might be scarred by, what happened with Akers, even though they got away with it. So I don't know that he's just going to be like a 90%, touch guy in this backfield going forward. I do think though that the Rams will run more this year. They're already dealing with some, just injuries at wide receiver, guys, not coming back. Stafford's going to have the elbow pain. So I do think that from that standpoint, there should be enough volume. So it's not a guy that I'm like, okay, I'm all the way out on, but I do like the guy next a little more. And that's James Conner at RB18. Jake, I don't know, to me, it just feels low, considering, he's kind of in a similar boat to to Akers in a way. It should be a good offense. And Connor, I mean, last year, if you watch this dude play, like it wasn't just okay, like he's scoring touchdowns. Like he at times looked like one of the best backs in football. And so I kind of put Connor in that like Leonard Fournette kind of tier where I just think people are too low on him. I know he's probably never going to be that 20 touch workhorse at this stage, to preserve him. But I really like his situation. I just really like the way he played. But what say you?
Yeah, so this is coming from somebody that loves James Conner throughout his career. So I think this is a fair spot for him. Would take Akers 10 times out of 10 over him, mostly because for me, there was two things. It's like James Conner was a little bit more effective, and that's just pure running game, but a little bit more effective once Hopkins was gone, not just from target standpoint. Those definitely targets. You saw more of it. But the interesting thing is like how this offense shifted with no Hopkins is that you watch it, Kyler Murray ran more effectively, and all his rushing touchdowns came when Hopkins was in the lineup, which is also when James Conner struggled a little bit more. But granted, he was getting his own rushing touchdowns, but his effectiveness actually went up a bit when there was no DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if that was because more of a threat in the passing game or more of a balance. It's kind of hard to pinpoint because you watch games, and as you said, at times he looks great, even when Hopkins was in there and was not in there. So it's hard to pinpoint Connor. And what I do know at this point, when I brought him up with Leonard Fournette and Zeke Elliott, what I will say we know about Connor is he's touchdown reliant. His touches aren't going to be 300. He's had an injury history. He has never played a full season. So I think this is a fair spot. Could he repeat and far succeed this spot? Absolutely. Is this a nice spot for me in the fact that you're baking in some of that risk and what happens when Hopkins does come back? What does this offense look like again now with Marquise Brown? I think that's fair, and that's why I like him at this spot. So it's very rare that I'm like, oh, like I'm okay with this spot. But like James Conner at RB 18, although I will say I would take him in front of David Montgomery.
Yeah. Like I think that's kind of where I was getting at. Some of these, I mean, if we're gonna take one of these guys, because they're all in a, again, they all have risks, but like if we're gonna take one of these guys, give me the guy going later who I think could outperform some of the other guys, or at least has the same kind of chance. But what do you think about Connor, Sean?
Yeah, I think he's my favorite back from this tier. And 5 games without Chase Edmonds last year, he averaged 21 half PPR points, which was more than Jonathan Taylor's full season average. So, and like you said, Rayvon, like he passed the eye test. He looked amazing last year. Yeah. He looked like a brand new running back. And part of the reason why he was such a workhorse is they had literally no depth outside of Edmonds and Connor. But this year they did beef up the backfield a little bit. They added Daryl Williams. They drafted Keontae Ingram, who I think is sneaky. So they, along with Benjamin, will probably fill in the Chase Edmonds role a bit, which does hurt James Conner's ceiling from what we saw last year. But he's not going to score 18 touchdowns this year. I'm aware of that. But he's still going to be their goal line back. The offense is still going to be putting up points. So I think we could bank on him possibly, breaking double-digit touchdowns again this year. So yeah, in this range, when all these guys we can poke holes in, I think Connor has the least, other than just his injury history, and he might not play every game, but at least when he's in there, we know he's going to put up, solid RB2 numbers.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it really hurts his ceiling in the sense that like it probably preserves him, like he needs that, like
yeah.
He needs those games where he can touch the ball like 15 times, but score 2 touchdowns. And then there will always be, those 4 or 5 games where they just have to give him 20 carries and he could do it. But I really like what I saw. I know that at times it wasn't always efficient, 3.7 yards per carry was actually a career low. But 10.1 yards per catch was a career high. So, he passed the eye test, good offense. Hopkins is going to be out 6 games anyway. Edmonds isn't there. I'll take Connor all day. I really love him. So I have him ranked significantly higher than his RB 18 spot. I have him in the low teens. So love me some James Conner this year where he's going. Okay, Jake. Things are starting to get dicey after Connor, like for real, in my opinion. Do you feel like this is kind of the start of a frozen pond tier, or do you think drafters should be targeting, these running backs in that, RB 20 to 30 range?
So the funny thing is here, I'll say Michael Florio, good friend that I used to do shows and stuff with over at NFL Network, he tweeted out something about the frozen pond, like this range, mentioned Gibson, some of these running backs we're going to talk about. And he said like, oh, it's, you might be able to take a few more darts. It's a little bit deeper this year.
Mm-hmm.
I said, for me, I wasn't coming at Florio, but like, and not even for you either. It's just a difference of opinions. There's a lot of running backs in this range that I would start the frozen pond after. Like for me, Gibson, Jacobs, Mitchell, Dobbins, now that we have the news. And then that might be about it. I would throw, because I think like 4 of those 5 were in his tweet. Those would come, and then I would start the frozen pond with like Damian Harris, who I do like, but deserves to be in that conversation. Miles Sanders deserves to be. All those. So there's about 4 or 5 that I would say before you got to that this year. And people are going to differ out there because that's why we're doing shows like this. People have different opinions, but there's a lot of those running backs that I would consider as rock solid RB2s for me. And I know that I'm on a ledge with a little bit more of them than other people are. But yeah, so I think we're getting into frozen pond range, but I think it is a little bit further back than it was last year.
Make the case actually for some of those guys, because I know that. Let's start with you mentioned Jacobs. I want to talk about him because I know some people were nervous. They saw him, out there in the preseason game, and they also saw how good Zamir White looked. So, and he was obviously Kenyon Drake there. So let's start with Jacobs. Just make the case for Josh Jacobs in 2022.
So, and I know he was a rookie, but like Najee Harris played a ton in the Hall of Fame game last year. So like before it's too much like, oh, what the talk might be. We're talking a new offensive coordinator. Drake was hurt. I'm not saying to not have any concern. This is something I'll say similar to, and I know this is actual game versus beat reporters, but I say this every single year. When you see a beat reporter say, ooh, blank had a good practice today, and that's the only person reporting it, whether he or she is the one, like, wait, just put a pin in it. Like, remember in the back of your head that somebody said that, but don't react until 4, 5, 6 beat reporters start saying the same thing, because just like why I said that about this conversation is I might like Jacobs more than 20 other experts, but do you want to believe me or the 19 that might be right? So that's why I say put that away. So the Jacobs, there's a lot of factors going on in the game. And the reason I bring that up is to say, well, if week 2 rolls out of the preseason, week 3 rolls out of the preseason, and now it's more of a committee. He's working with the second team while it's still out there. All right, now let's take a little bit of a note. But Jacobs, I will say on the positive side, look good. 1, 2, was actually being used in the passing game. Like how many times have we said that? But I think Jacobs is their best back. I think Zamir White's a fine complimentary piece. I think Kenyon Drake at this point is a complimentary piece. I think he's part of the Gruden bring-in regime. I think Jacobs is looking at still 55, 60%. And if what we expect this offense to be what it was last year, I think Jacobs deserves to be a solid RB2. But that's why he's RB20 and he's not RB12.
Yeah, and I mean, it just given the offense that he's in, it does seem kind of interesting that like he's going, well after David Montgomery. I mean, if you're just talking, because like you're kind of, there's a lot of early down backs in this tier. Like, let's be honest. And you're kind of looking for touchdowns. Like I would say I have Jacobs ranked the highest in standard, then a little less high in half PPR, and the lowest in PPR. Cause I think you have, Adams, Renfro, Waller. So yes, Jacobs was using the passing game last year when guys were hurt and no Adams was there, but I don't think they need to use him in the pass game this year. So I do think that will come down. But I don't think I'm like super worried about him yet. I think at the end of the day, that's what this tier is. It's guys who are going to plan early downs. That's never going to be, 80%. That's going to be, like you said, 50, 60. So, that's a good point on Jacobs. Sean, how you feeling about Jacobs and just some of the other backs in this, early downs here? Gibson's another one. I kind of want your opinion on.
Yeah. So all these guys I would consider sort of the frozen pond tier. Plus I'm targeting, we're going to talk about these backs a little bit later, but I'm targeting 3 specific backs in this range. So I'm not getting much exposure on these guys, but I will say this frozen pond is a lot better than last year. Remember, it was like Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin, and like, I think Raheem Mostert was here. So this frozen pond tier is actually legit. All these guys have, low end RB1 upside. I'm not denying that, but every single one of these guys just has just floor concerns where Antonio Gibson, he's going to be sandwiched between JD McKissick and Brian Robinson, who will be getting the high value targets, the receptions and goal line work potentially. So that's very scary for Gibson. Josh Jacobs, again, we're kind of concerned of a potential three-way committee with Zamir White and Kenyon Drake. That's an issue with me. Elijah Mitchell, he begins the season as the 49ers starting running back, which has been the biggest trap in fantasy football each of the past 4 seasons. I think he might be the guy that breaks that trend. He looked really good last year. I don't know why they wouldn't use him as workhorse back this year, but fool me once, shame on me kind of thing. So he's definitely frozen pond just because of Kyle Shanahan. J.K. Dobbins is, he's going to be eased in to begin the season, and he's already limited in the receiving game, which limits his upside. And Damian Harris, he could get leapfrogged by Ramondre Stevenson at any point. And Rashad Penny could be splitting work with Kenneth Walker. So there's floor concern with all these guys. And in this range, I'm telling you, I'm targeting 3 other backs instead.
Yeah, I want to spend some time on this range because this is the range where I think people could just make mistakes. It is kind of landmines, even if you do like some of them. I will say this, I did, earlier in the offseason, I think Gibson was still in like that, the early teens, and he's been dropping. But I think there's a misconception, and I've stated this going back to AJ Dillon's rookie year. It's like when they get when a team drafts a rookie back for short yardage, everyone just assumes that short yardage is going to include goal line, but it can just include short yardage. Like, remember, the Washington at one point had like Peyton Barber for short yardage. That didn't mean he got every goal line carry. It's like you give your best back the ball at the goal line. Like Aaron Jones was still getting. I think he's like put up like 15 touchdowns that year, and everyone wrote him off like, oh, AJ Dillon's going to steal a touchdown. So like, I don't think Antonio Gibson is just going to miraculously be pulled at the goal line for a rookie when he's been Washington's, second best offensive player, since he was drafted. So that I'm not concerned with. I am concerned with Carson Wentz, who may not be able to bring the offense down the field. He's already having issues. Like if you read training camp reports about Carson Wentz, like he's already in the stock down section, which just worries me. So that would be my concern. But like, it's not like if Gibson starts dropping, I've seen him drop to like RB 25, 26, like a whole round. Yeah. I'm fine with him. Like, I'm fine with him. Don't take him at value, but I'm fine.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think Gibson could absolutely be a workhorse back. I would use him as a goal line back and a pass catching back. And I take your point with you don't really have a concern about goal line touches. Brian Robinson potentially similar way. Who we have no concern about goal line touches? The guy going right before him, James Conner. So I'm just saying that the fact that we're even able to have a discussion is all I'm saying. Whereas James Conner, there's no discussion there. So that's why I'm just being a little bit cautious. Like you said, RB19, a little bit rich, but outside of the top 25, sometimes he falls there. Absolutely.
Yeah, the go real quick, I just want to get out of the way. The Dobbins one, I agree with you, Sean. It could be like kind of the Barkley last year, but at least we're getting him at a discount versus Barkley last year, where you might have to wait to October to get him 100%. The two that we're touching on, Gibson and Mitchell, that I wanted to come back with. Yeah, Gibson I've had in this range the entire time because I made the argument, as you just said, is the fact that is this really an upgrade when it comes to Carson Wentz? Like and I broke it down and I went through and I'm looking at all the games and it's like Heineke versus Wentz. The only difference was really touchdown to interception ratio. Everything else, you're looking at a very similar quarterback. And so when you talk about the offense, that's a valid thing to throw out there. The Antonio Gibson thing, I tweeted this yesterday too, and I said that even before they lost McKissick, so if you just go with the games where McKissick was out there, Gibson was still RB 15 to 20, depending on your scoring format, in that range, both overall and in points per game. He's still going to get that work. The only concern that you mentioned, Raybon, is the fact that, they're talking about the short yardage. Like, if Gibson continues to fumble, and he's fumbling at the goal line, and then they lose, but you would need 3-4 weeks of that. And that, again, that's a possibility. That's why he's down here. But it's not going to happen week one. Like, he's not going to fumble once and they're going to, boom, yank him off and you're never going to see him again. It's going to be Brian Robinson show. And how many times have we done? You just mentioned the A.J. Dillon. Let's just even say Brian Robinson is no guarantee to succeed in the NFL. I love rookies as much as anybody. But let's chill out before we just hand the job off to Brian Robinson that, he's already showed out great. And we have seen him do great. We still don't know. The Elijah Mitchell thing, I rattled this off to Ratcliffe when he was on my show. I said, tell me whose game log this is for carries. 19-17-9 where he got banged up. 18-18, 8 in a miserable game against Arizona. 27, 27, 22, 21, 21, 27. Those 20s were with Debo being Debo, by the way, where he was starting to run 5, 6, 7 times a game. I know we've gotten Shanahan in the past, but this time last year, as you mentioned, Sean, everybody wanted Raheem Mostert. He got hurt. Everybody wanted Jeff Wilson the years before that. A lot of Shanahan's turnover has been injury related. I am fully in on Elijah Mitchell, but let's remember they don't want to use the specific roles. He's not used in the passing game, even though he can catch the ball. He's basically discount Derrick Henry.
Elijah Mitchell. I mean, I struggle with him a little bit because I honestly do think RB21 is a little too high. And the reason is I do agree with what you said about, like, you know, the carries were there, the game logs were amazing, and he looked good. Like, he's another guy that passed the eye test. But as I read these beat reports, and like you said, you know, multiple beat reports, Kyle Shanahan's been quoted as essentially saying, I am worried about Mitchell's health. I am worried about his ability to handle a full workload over the course of a 17-game season. That is why we drafted Ty Davis-Price. That is why we have this, you know, deep running back room. And really, I mean, Shanahan kind of fell into it with Mitchell last year. I mean, I think it was like the first or second week of the season, every running back on the depth chart got hurt, even Trenton Cannon, and they had to, like, put Mitchell back in the game after he got hurt. And, you know, he just ran away with the job. But
except for Trey Sermon, who they traded up to get and took in the third round. And that's why they took him last year. So,
yeah. I mean, all I'm saying is I do think that Mitchell will be managed. Now, does that mean he doesn't get goal line work? I don't think so, because I still think at the end of the day, he's their best back. I think he's still going to be in the leverage situations. But would I be surprised if they try to scale back his workload? No, because I do think that Shanahan had a point. I mean, Mitchell was in and out of the lineup himself, and I'm sure Shanahan is just scarred from year after year. Like, all his running backs are getting hurt, and Mitchell's probably been the best one. So I do think they'll kind of conserve him a little bit. You know, so that, you know, there are like a wider range of outcomes this year than last year where you could just pencil him in for 17 to 20 carries. So, you know, that's, I think RB21 a little bit steep. Dobbins, you know, I've been vocally down on him the majority of the offseason. Now he's, you know, off the pup list. He's back practicing. I did read a report that said he was laboring and it was a struggle.
That's always good.
Back. Like, no, but I mean, they're also like, you know, that's kind of expected. But, like, it doesn't make me feel great when I'm taking a one-dimensional guy. Because, like, I mean, listen, we saw what happened. I know different injury, but we saw what happened with Cam Akers last year, right? You know, it's like, oh, wow, he's amazing. He's young. He's coming back off this injury that, you know, 10 years ago, nobody would have dreamed of. But then it was just like, maybe he should have just stayed out. Like, I need to monitor J.K. Dobbins very closely and, like, see visual proof over and over. And I don't know if we'll get that, because I don't think they'll play him in the preseason.
They're not going to.
Yeah, they're not going to. So it's like, we're going to, I mean, every camp, like, the camps are, you know, we still get footage, but, like, I have to really see something with Dobbins to justify this, because I mean, the Ravens still, you know, they still have a bunch of backs on the roster. You know, Edwards will still be back at some point. And even when Dobbins, you know, took off his rookie year, he was still getting about 13 carries per game, and Edwards is getting about 9. So, like, it's always, I think, going to be a committee. I can't really justify his draft spot, even if he is, you know, back to kind of what he is. I just think there's a better way to kind of go about your draft, especially in half PPR or full PPR, than going Dobbins at this spot where you could be, I think, kind of shoring up your receiving core and just wait a little longer and still get some good values at running back. So those 4 guys, I think, though, those are going to be very polarizing: Gibson, Jacobs, Mitchell, Dobbins. I mean, Harris we kind of know what it is. It's like, you know, New England's going to mix in Stevenson. New England is just going to do whatever works. You know, they might have a different guy for a different week just based on some intricate detail that we don't know about. Right. And then Penny, I mean, he's missed 27 out of 65 career games. I mean, I think that's more worrisome than even, I think they drafted Kenneth Walker because they know that. And so it's like, how much Penny do you get? You know, that's more the issue with him. But Jake, let's jump into, you know, 2 other guys in this tier as well, but I kind of grouped them together because I feel like there's this potential for them to be like post-height sleepers or just terrible bust. Number 1 is Clyde Edwards-Helaire going at RB27. And number 2 is Miles Sanders going right after at RB28. Thoughts on both of those guys?
Yeah, I have 0 shares so far, both of them. Interestingly,
Okay.
I think the Edwards-Helaire, this is a couple factors at play here, but I think the biggest one is everybody's trying to hope and chase what is the Chiefs' offense. That's why you see Isaiah Pacheco get news, and all of a sudden his ADP skyrockets in 2 days. And then before that, it was Ronald Jones, because Ronald Jones might be the lead, and Edwards-Helaire might be the change of pace. And that's, oh, they brought back Jerick McKinnon. Like, at this point, we might be headed to the Chiefs version of the Patriots, where it's all four. They had a report yesterday. All four might be active and on the roster. So I would just look at it more so of what happened. I did the draft this past weekend. I don't want Ronald Jones, but in the 14th round, I'm just going to take the cheapest one. If Pacheco goes in the 12th and Jones goes in the 14th, I'll take the cheapest one. If Jones still goes in the 10th and Pacheco falls all the way down, or maybe Edwards-Helaire ends up going cheap. He's probably never going to be the cheapest, but if he gets down to around 9 or 10, I'll say I'll take the best discount here, because you're basically rolling the dice of one of 3, potentially one of 4, and you still might not get great value. So I want cheap discount here. Miles Sanders has more to do with, and I'm not going to go too much into him because I see Sean has something here. And if anybody wants to see my article of my top 5 breakouts, my 5th breakout to go even deeper was Kenneth Gainwell. So I'll save that for Sean, and if anyone wants to read the article. But part of the reason I'm not in on Miles Sanders is not because I think he can't score touchdowns this year. He'll score more than 0 this year. But I am a fan of Kenneth Gainwell being the breakout in this backfield. So I'm kind of out on both.
Sean, go jump right in.
Yeah, similar here. They are pretty cheap. They could end up posting high-end RB2 numbers, but it's just too risky right now. More likely than not, they're going to end up being in very frustrating running back committees. So I'm a fan of just taking their backups. So yeah, like Jake alluded to, I rather target Gainwell much later. And then with the Chiefs backfield, yeah, I rather just take a flyer on like a Ronald Jones or even the Pacheco home run, flyer in the last round of the draft. But that his ADP is going up quite a bit right now. But I rather just invest in like long shots in those backfields because there is a lot of potential there. But yeah, these guys still feel frozen pondy to me.
I think I'm a lot more worried about Edwards-Helaire. I know the offense is sexy. I know he looked great in college that final year, but like let's compare him to Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has averaged at least 5.5 yards per touch every single year of his career. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has never averaged more than 5.1, and he dropped from 5.1 to 4.7 last year. I just worry that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just not as talented as maybe he looked that final year at LSU. I mean, it just because like Andy Reid's not an idiot. Like if anyone could get the most out of a guy, it's right. Andy Reid, and like it just really and Patrick Mahomes, and it just seems like this is another one of those situations kind of similar to San Francisco, where you don't want to start with their back, you want to end with their back. So like, I don't know how it's going to kind of, the pieces are going to fall. Jake, to your point, like, the cheapest guy a lot of times is Ronald Jones right now. And it's an offense that, could present some touchdown opportunities, especially without known touchdown scorer Tyreek Hill still on the team. So he could be the goal line back, because Edwards-Helaire, aside from like that one highlight against Pittsburgh last year where he trucked 2 guys, has really struggled in the goal line. So, and like that's the difference. Like Sanders, I don't really feel like he's a bad goal line back. He just got really unlucky last year. But like Sanders has put up like Nick Chubb yard per carry averages. Like Miles Sanders, when they started running the ball more last year, was like looked amazing. So Sanders, to me, just as much as I hate to say it, because I liked Edwards-Helaire a lot coming out, I just think Sanders passes the eye test more. I think Sanders, I just think Sanders is a better play than Edwards-Helaire. Both of them I don't want too much of, but of the two, I think I would go Sanders over Edwards-Helaire every time at this point.
I would, in that case, yeah.
All right, so now I know that I know Sean's going to be excited about these guys, but Jake, I'll let you start it off and then let Sean wax poetic. But what are your thoughts on taking what is essentially the lesser half of a running back by committee that's still going with the ADP in the top 32 running backs. You have AJ Dillon at RB26. You have Kareem Hunt at RB31, just requested a trade, got denied. And you also have Tony Pollard, the best back in the history of football, yes. As you said, going at RB number 32.
So I actually like this range, especially the Kareem Hunt thing worries me a little bit, but also worries me a little bit for the fact that last year we saw him step in for Nick Chubb and basically just still be Kareem Hunt. And then all of a sudden he goes down. Dearness Johnson got bell cow work. It's like, I don't know, is that chicken the egg? And like they just had nobody else left, but it's just weird that they didn't use Hunt quite in the full bell cow. So where I really like Dillon and Pollard more than Hunt, not that I dislike Hunt, but just specifically in this range, and I especially like Dillon, is because if Aaron Jones goes down, AJ Dillon top 10. If Zeke goes down, Tony Pollard top 15, maybe even top 10. Like you're getting guys who, if you go wide receiver heavy, draft a tight end early as well. You're getting guys that could be your RB2s, which again, it's not the sexiest RB2, but it's somebody who you can plug in your RB2 when you have a team built this way, who, if anything happens, now it's a league winner because you went wide receiver heavy, or maybe you went bell cow RB, hero RB, you have one, and now you have a second to mention with the fact that you have 3 or 4 wide receivers. So I love these guys, as it sounds like Sean does as well. I'm more in on, like, if I had to rank them, maybe Dillon, Pollard, and Hunt, but I think these are always great picks every single year. And to be honest, like, I think there are some rookies, and you mentioned Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny was further down into the 30s. The offense is killing him, but I think that, if he did what he did last year and Ken Walker gets hurt as a rookie, you could see him have top 15 value too, although that offense kind of hurts him a little bit. But yeah, I think these are always smart plays to have.
John, yeah, I'm throwing you to Ali.
By all means. So these are my 3 favorite backs to target, and you can check out my running back upside chart where I kind of grade each backup running back based on their ADP, where I would rank them when the starting running back is, active, and where I'd rank them with the starter out. And all 3 of these backs have an A+ grade for me because, where they're going at ADP, they're probably going to outproduce this even if the starting running back plays all 17 games. So they should be able to provide you low end RB2 flex value any given week. But as Jake mentioned, they have top 10 upside whenever the starting running back misses time. And this is a very fragile position. Running back usually sees the most missed games. So I consider these 3 backs anti-fragile, where you're essentially getting their upside, their built-in massive upside for free. So that's why I love targeting all 3 of these guys. If I get all 3 of these guys in a draft, I'm very happy, because I think at times, one of these guys will probably be producing, low-end RB1 value. So I just love stacking my roster with these guys with built-in upside, where, again, even if the running back ahead of them were to stay healthy, they'll still outperform it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great way to look at it, and especially, because like I said this year, I think you do want to be aggressive with wide receiver. That's just how the game is going. But especially this year, I think it would pay off to be aggressive in that top 10 of wide receivers. I mean, if you could even get 2 of those guys in the top 10, I know, Jake, you said you like to get 2 backs. I don't actually mind getting 2 receivers if I can get 2 in the top 10 and taking a bunch of darts later. Because, I mean, this tier last year, like you guys mentioned, guys that might not even make their respective teams this year. I mean, Mike Davis might not make the roster this year, Raheem Mostert, I mean, he will because the coach loves him. But, yeah, I mean, like, these are all – Myles Gaskin probably doesn't make the roster if Mostert does. So, yeah, it is deep. I will say this, as I've been kind of, fiddling around with my projections, I think Dillon is the guy that really stands out to me, because I kind of went back and, you always got to kind of assume, we talk about it, you can't really predict injuries. So you have to assume that Nick Chubb is going to play, 14 to 16 games. You have to assume Aaron Jones is going to do the same. You have to assume Zeke is going to do the same. Now, when I project what that would be like if those guys do, I actually have Hunt and Pollard pretty much ranking out where they are being taken. But AJ Dillon, I have him about 5-6 spots higher, even with Aaron Jones healthy, because number one, of the 3, Dillon's the only one that was essentially splitting carries, like with his partner from the jump. He's in an offense that just lost literally a third of its production. So it's going to shift from like a pass heavy offense where one guy scores a ton of touchdowns to an offense that should still be good because you still have an MVP level quarterback taking you up and down the field. You still have a great defense, but now I just think there are going to be a lot more rushing opportunities. I think there are going to be a lot more rushing touchdowns. And I think this is the year where we're finally going to get our AJ doing touchdowns, not taking them away from Aaron Jones, but right. I just think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns scored in Green Bay, and Devontae Adams ain't going to be scoring them. And neither are like Randall Cobb and all these, Sammy Watkins. So like, Dylan is the clear, front runner of them. And he is going a few spots higher in ADP, but I just think that's rightfully so. And I would still take him there. And then, like you said, he has that added upside of,
yes,
wow, if Jones goes down, Dylan's probably the top one of all of them anyway. So love me some Dylan. Hunt and Pollard. I like them, but I think they're actually being taken, pretty much where they should be going, just based on the fact that we can't actually predict injury.
Yeah, you know who else I would throw into this group? The least sexy guy that I would include in this group is Melvin Gordon, because he offers the same. He can sneak in RB3 flex value most weeks, and then he does have high end RB2 upside if Javonte were to miss time. But it looks like Melvin tweaked his ankle or foot something in practice today, so we'll have to see what's up with that. So Javonte Twitter might be going off today if it turns to be serious. But I would say Gordon's a sneaky candidate for this group.
That'd be a roller coaster. I would throw Khalil Herbert in this group as well.
Oh yeah, definitely a cheaper version. Yeah.
Hey, if we're gonna do the arbitrage, then
here we go.
We have to keep with the theme of our podcast. It all leads back to a Detroit Lion. If you like Melvin Gordon, then we got to just get Jamal Williams in this conversation.
Oh no,
with his like 12, 13 touches per game. I mean, if we're talking like that.
Oh yeah, normally I would agree, but they just brought in Justin Jackson, so that might kill that part.
Yeah, they just brought in Justin Jackson. He had no job until now. Did you see first of all, did you see Williams' speech on Hard Knocks? Okay, this guy is a leader. Yeah. He's gonna get those leader carries like Adrian Peterson did that year. It doesn't matter if he averages 2.6 yards per carry. Like he's
leader
gonna
carries.
be in there.
Can we add that to our projection file? Leader carries.
Yeah, I think we need a separate tab. Well, I'll create one after the pod. But I'm half joking, but I mean that is kind of how you want to think about these things. Like you always want to find arbitrage opportunities for these different guys. Melvin Gordon, Jamal Williams, Khalil Herbert, these are guys that, could potentially perform what people wasting much higher picks are looking for. Jake, the young guns, we have another kind of, they're not exactly a tier because they're a little more spread out, but I kind of want to talk about them together. Of the rookies, and I'm counting Travis Etienne as a rookie because he didn't actually play regular season snap last year. You have Breece Hall at RB22. You have Etienne one spot later at RB23. You have Ken Walker III at RB36. And you have James Cook at RB41. And I know there's some more guys, but we'll talk some longer shots. Yeah, so we'll save those. But of these four that are kind of going in that top 40, who do you have as the best value relative to their average draft position?
Yeah, so that's the key here, is because Hall and Etienne for my rankings are both just a tick behind where I have them higher, but they're very close. James Cook, very close. So the biggest gap I actually have is Ken Walker. I do think Cook could be nice, but Cook needs Singletary to go down. He's going to be used in the passing game. They think they don't want to use Singletary until late last year, which some people have speculated. There's been reports that have speculated that Dable was part of the reason that Singletary was never used as a bell cow, but whatever it might be, I just don't think you want to use Singletary as a bell cow, and that's why you draft James Cook, and that's why they flirted with McKissick. McKissick was on his way there, and then changed his mind in return. So I think James Cook is stepping. I think James Cook isn't a 20-touch guy either, but you're still killed in a backfield by what is Josh Allen, what is the biggest part about Josh Allen is no, he's not running for 1,000 yards like Lamar Jackson, but he is going to run half the time inside the 10, just like Cam Newton used to do his backfields, which Cam Newton had a valuable running back, but that's when he had a bell cow running back, which is what Devin Singletary was for some time. So I say all to say that's why I'm in on James Cook, but my value, my rankings isn't much higher than this. I think that what Sean brought up earlier about what would be my rankings if the lead guy was hurt, Cook would be much higher. Breece Hall, I think, should be a little bit, but not much. So it's Ken Walker, and I know the offense, I talked about it earlier, probably could struggle, whether it's Geno or Drew Lock. Sounds like it's still Geno. It's probably not going to be a very high octane offense. It should be a bottom 5. The offensive line is another question in this one. Rashad Penny looked great. I loved Rashad Penny. Everybody tweeted, Jake, it's finally happening for Rashad Penny. But you draft Ken Walker to be the lead complementary piece, and I think this is a backfield that could be a true 50-50 if you look at what the Broncos did last year with their Javonte Williams situation. The biggest concern I have and why he's the biggest, but only by default, is because I have Ken Walker as fringe top 30, just because he should be the lead. But, this isn't the Broncos situation where I think Ken Walker could be first, second down, goal line, short yards, and maybe 20 targets. I think Rashad Penny could be the pass catching option with maybe 100 carries, because if they both stay healthy, because Ken Walker's struggles in college at the passing game are legitimate. And I think that if you've already seen reports about it, yeah, he's made some plays, but there's been a lot too, where just like in college, he turned around the wrong way. He dropped the pass that was like, so it's Ken Walker, but it's by default. Sorry, good old Barkley getting excited at the end of the show. Somebody just leaving to deliver here, but it's Ken Walker by default. All of them are not that far off from where I have them ranked.
Yeah, Sean, talk to me about these 4 young gunners: Hall, Etienne, Walker, and Cook. Who do you like as the best value?
I think the best value has got to be James Cook, just because he's going later. But I have no problem taking Breece Hall, RB22. He was my favorite rookie from this class. I didn't like the landing spot. Like, the Jets was not ideal. The offensive line could be a problem. And plus, we have to remember, the coaching staff is from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. So who knows how they're going to handle this backfield. But I think he certainly deserves to be a workhorse back this year. So I do like him at RB22. I think Etienne has a better situation on the Jags, especially it seems like James Robinson won't be healthy to begin the season, or really at all. I mean, he's coming back from an Achilles injury, and we know that's devastating for a back. So I think Etienne will be closer to workhorse back than I think people realize. And being a pass catching specialist is good when you're on the Jaguars, because there's going to be plenty of trailing game scripts. So I don't mind Etienne at 23 either. Ken Walker at RB 36, I want nothing to do with. His value will depend on Rashad Penny's health, but when Penny is healthy, they're going to be splitting early down work. Walker really doesn't have, pass blocking skills or pass catching skills. So it's gonna be tough for him to find value in this dreadful Seattle offense this year. And then Cook, yeah, he probably doesn't have league winning upside that we like to target, but in PPR formats, he can certainly provide RB3 flex value when Devin Singletary's in there. Obviously they want a pass catching back. So I think he's sneaky in that he'll probably provide a higher floor than these backs. So getting him outside of the top 40, I think is probably the best value of the rookies.
That's fair.
I love me some Cook as a player, but I'm actually with Jake. I do think that he's going to be a lot more like JD McKissick than people realize. So like that's something that like,
there is some value to that though, right?
There is some value to that, but I mean, I'm looking for a guy that, can kind of get those, 20 touches and do essentially, what a guy like Rashad Penny did down the stretch last year. I think Breece Hall is probably the one I'm most comfortable with because, like, yes, he's going to start out as like the 1A to Carter's 1B, but, if Carter goes down or just Hall plays well, I could see that turning into a situation where, Hall, does kind of approach those 20 touches per game. He was my favorite back coming out as well. I think Etienne, I'm a little bit, I like the player, but I'm hearing some weird stuff out of Jags camp, man. Like, I'm hearing that James Robinson might be the passing down back and that Etienne might be used more as a runner because he was great at that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and like also James Robinson is actually practicing and he took his first team reps the other day. So like, we're not out of the woods with this whole Etienne Robinson split just yet. Either. Walker, to me, I like where he's going because, like, again, like, yes, you can't predict injuries, but Rashad Penny, I mean, this guy has missed almost half of his games through 4 years. And it seems just like when you have a Seahawks back, like Pete Carroll gets you all fired up to run the ball and then you go out and break yourself. So like it happened to Chris Carson. It seems to happen to Penny every year. So like, I'll take the cheaper Seahawks back. I like Kenneth Walker in the rookie of the year market too, just because like if Penny just does what he does and gets hurt at some point, like they're still going to run the ball. They still have 2 receivers on the outside, at least that could keep the defense honest, even though it shouldn't be a great offense. So I think Hall is the one I'm most comfortable with. Love Cook as a player, but I think he's more of a PPR guy. And then Walker, I think could get you, from RB 36 to like RB 15, the very real possibility that Penny goes down. But we'll close the show out with this favorite backs going outside the top 40 at ADP. Jake, go.
Yeah, so that's we're glad we didn't touch on that here, because if we did top young rookie / ETN values, I want the other three we didn't talk about. I want Damian Pierce, Isaiah Spiller, and Tyler Algier. I think Algier could be the lead. It should be. I know they listed him like 8th on a depth chart or something like that. But I compared him a little bit to a former Falcon and Tevin Coleman. Not ideally 1-to-1, but you just want him running between the tackles, taking on the hits. He loves to take on hits, just run through. He's like discount Damian Pierce, who's discount Derrick Henry. I think Damian Pierce has some passing game upside, but another just lead running back. I think Marlon Mack has been overinflated by the fantasy community, in my opinion. I think he's a replaceable running back. He's good. I just don't think he's great. And not that I think Damian Pierce is great, but I think he has more explosiveness than Marlon Mack at this point. If that's a full-blown committee, sure, but you're not paying a price where you have to worry about it, because you just mentioned outside the top 40. And then Isaiah Spiller. Now, this is coming from somebody that was higher than most people in the draft process on Isaiah Spiller. So if you disagree on the process of Spiller, but for years, what have we seen the Chargers trying to do? Find a complementary, take some share off of Austin Eckler, and they tried it with Jackson, as you mentioned, who's now with Detroit. They tried it with Joshua Kelly. They tried it with Larry Roundtree. They finally found their answer, and they found their answer, who I think that you can put Isaiah Spiller into the conversation with A.J. Dillon and Hunt, not in that tier, as in the next group of tiers of maybe like a Herbert and a Melvin Gordon and stuff like that, where if anything were to happen to Austin Eckler, which has happened in the past, holy crap, Isaiah Spiller on that offense. So the other three rookies that we didn't talk about, and then of course Rashad White, we talked at the top of the show, but Pierce, Spiller, and Algier, I'm a big fan getting a lot of them in the double-digit rounds.
Sean?
Yeah, so once we get outside the top 40, their end of season value really comes down to the health of the starting running back on the team. So that's why I like to do my upside rankings chart, where I grade guys, and I like to place guys in different groupings. And Alexander Madison is the first guy. Like, he typically goes around the RB 40 range. And he is the definition of a high upside backup bench stash, where he's not going to provide you value as long as Dalvin Cook is healthy. But once or if Dalvin Cook misses time, I mean, he offers low end RB1 value. And we've known that for years now. So you can usually get a couple of games from him every year. So I love, just drafting Madison as a bench stash. And the other guy I mentioned earlier is Kenneth Gainwell. I kind of like getting these high floor PPR kind of backs like a Nyheim Hines, JD McKissick, but Gainwell has a unique opportunity where he can like actually leapfrog Miles Sanders, or at least eat into his workload more than we think. It seems like he's going to be, the pass down back, which makes sense, but he could see goal line carries. And his role could expand. So he could offer, high floor and ceiling combo. So I like where he's going. And the last one is, you're going to hate me for this, it's Mark Ingram, just because he has the clearest path to potentially offering RB3 flex value. We don't know if or when Alvin Kamara will get suspended, but that's a clear path to, potentially 6 games of starter value. So, he's 32. He's probably not going to offer high-end, RB2 value. And he has some competition in that backfield. He's one of those guys in this range where you can't really say that about any other back. So I like his clear path to 6 games of value with Kamara's potential suspension.
Yeah. Like all those guys, Pierce has been kind of sneaking up the ADP. Mm-hmm. So I don't love that he's going so high. Algier, I think might he's got a shot because that backfield is wide open. They only want to give Patterson, maybe even less work than last year. But Avery Williams is playing well, which does complicate things. And I know they have a plan for Williams. But I've been taking some Algier as well. Love what you said about Gainwell, Sean. Ingram, he's kind of staring at me in some best ball drafts, and I'm like, should I take the plunge? But I've definitely taken him. I'm thinking the same thing. He could have a few weeks where he's just, that top guy. For me, I'll go a little bit more off the map. Well, first is a guy I already mentioned, Jamal Williams. I mean, he's still a guy who could get double-digit touches just without anything, changing. And this is a top 3 offensive line. Offense should be much better. They should have, touchdown opportunities. So I think, don't forget about him. It won't be sexy, but I do like him. I'm not worried about Justin Jackson. I think, Jamal Williams is always going to be the number 2, but they, Craig Reynolds, that's who I think is going to be challenged by Jackson, if at all. But some other guys, I like Eno Benjamin. Eno Benjamin, from all reports, is kind of running away with that number 2 running back job. We talked about Connor and the fragility, but how valuable this role could be in this Arizona offense anyway. So I think Eno is an interesting guy who may even just work himself into the Chase Edmonds role, full stop, at which we know, that was, usually top 30, top 35 value, sometimes better than that. So he's free. I think you take him as a dart throw. I do like Daryl Henderson, because I do think that the Rams will run a lot more. I think it's a great offense. And I do think that, there could be some room in this offense this year for Henderson to kind of mix in more than we've seen. And I think, if Cam Akers, goes down, I think Henderson, at least for the short term, will be a guy that actually does hit that 20 touch mark. I don't think they do it long term, but I do like his upside there. Nyheim Hines, they've been talking all offseason about getting him more touches. He keeps alternating between years of like 50 less touches than the year before. So this is an up year for him. Frank Reich seems to know it. But like, Nyheim Hines, remember like a couple years ago when they were using him, he was like, oh my God, like this he was scoring touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Like he was doing all kinds of things. I mean, maybe he even, gets, eats into Taylor, not like on purpose, like, oh, they're going to sub Taylor out for him, but maybe, Hines just happens to be in the game on a passing down and they score, and it's Hines that scores. So I like that, anytime you can kind of hit the number 1 player in the game and be anti-fragile with that. I like it. Ty Davis-Price, another guy. Always take the cheapest Niner back. They drafted him on day 2.
Wouldn't that be Trey Sermon this year, though?
No.
That is true.
If you follow the logic, the past 4 seasons, Trey Sermon actually fits.
I don't want running back Dante Pettis. No thanks.
This is old. Like, where's Justin Forsett when we need him for the Ravens?
Yeah. And I do one more guy, rookie, because again, it's very profitable just historically to target rookie running backs. Like, you don't always know which one will hit. So depending what kind of league format you're in, you could just kind of stash these guys on your bench. I do think Brian Robinson is still worthwhile. Not that I think he's going to get like goal line carries right off the bat, but Antonio Gibson got 300 touches last year. He did like lose efficiency. So I do think they'll work Robinson in a little more than most rookies. And, Robinson, McKissick would be the only other guy there. He's kind of a certain type of back. So Robinson does have some upside as well. If Gibson goes down, he's a lot cheaper than paying for, what could be a shaky offense, at RB20. So, just again, I think the moral of the story is, target these rookies and target guys that are kind of locked into some guaranteed touches, once you get outside that top 40. But this was a great, really packed pod, but Jake, I know you got, a fiance to get back to now. So I'll let you get out of here. Just thank you so much for doing this. It was great. Tell everybody where you're at and what you're up to.
I'm at Cloud9, fiance. No, so over at The Athletic, I tweet everything out at All In Kids the easiest way, but the rankings projections over there, customizable projections, which if you say, hey, I just listened to this entire podcast and Jake's an idiot, I'm going to go change his projections. It auto sorts and redoes everything for you. So you just download that. But in the middle of a series of guys similar to Sean, but in a different way. I really like that Sean does that, and I didn't want to steal that from him, so I've never done rankings that way. But I do an article every single year it's in the same vein. It's guys who could be ones, and then this is how, and the likelihood of them becoming ones. Not all of them involve injuries. So I think that's really good. I love that Sean does that. So it's a similar style to that. And then my favorite one next week, last year's trash. The guys that burned you that nobody ever wants to go back to, but you should.
Saquon.
There you go.
Thanks so much, Jake. I really appreciate it. You guys can find Sean on Twitter at @_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon, and you can find us at those same handles in the free award-winning Action Network app. Be sure to check out actionnetwork.com for our rankings and projections. And we'll be back next week with some more episodes. Keep it going. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.